Welcome to Adventure Beers. This is a show where we crack open a cold one and dive into the wildest adventure stories from some of the most interesting people out there. And today we have a true legend joining us, Uncle Joe. Born and raised in Matari, Zimbabwe in the 1960s, his life has been nothing short of extraordinary, from adventure motorcycles to overlanding across untamed landscapes and even soaring through the skies in a microlight. He's done it all. He's got more stories than we can fit into one episode. So who knows, this might just be the first of many. We hope his passion for adventure inspires you as much as it inspired us. So grab a beer, settle in, and let's get into it. Uncle Joe, welcome to Adventure Beers. Cheers, boys.
Cheers.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, pleasure. Nice to have you here.
Awesome. So this is our first episode that we're probably going to do on adventure beers.
Yes.
A new idea, we just came up with it this week, to say we're going to go out, talk to adventurers, people that's inspired us in terms of what we do, stories from 20, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, and that's inspiring us to get out there more.
Yeah.
So we're at Uncle Joe's, and he's got a place called Bushboys here at Tonteldoos. And I saw that board as you turn off in Dullstroom, it says, where the hell is
Tonteldoos.
Where the hell is Tonteldoos? I'll probably put the hell in. So, where's Tonteldoos? It's about 20 k's north of Dullstroom here in the
West
of Dullstroom.
Yeah.
And the area is just Tonteldoos.
Yeah.
Beautiful landscapes, absolutely brilliant. So, Uncle Joe's got a place here called Bushboys, accommodation, motorcycle track. If you can explain a bit more about Bushboys and why and how long you've been here.
Okay. Well, to go back to the beginning, my wife wanted to marry a farmer. Ruth always wanted to marry a farmer. So when we got married, I said one day we'll buy a farm. We've been married 52 years and we bought this farm.
As of yesterday.
52 years and one day.
And we bought the farm 15 years ago. She looked for a farm for an awful lot of time, and we looked around. Of course, there were certain characteristics. It had to be affordable. That was number one. It had to be scenically attractive, because once you've bought it, you're stuck with it. 3, it had to have good water, because land without water has got no value. 4, it had to have no people living on it, because of course that has its own implications. And 5, it had to do it for you here. So we saw this place eventually after looking at a lot of farms, and we bought it. And then funny enough, sometime after we bought it, we found a little graveyard underneath the wattle trees there. And in the grave, there are 2 graves in it, a child, Swanepoel, born and died on the same day, and Kidson, who died as an elderly man, 1949, and that turned out to be, after a big genealogical search, to be Ruth's grandfather's cousin.
What?
On this farm. So the Kidsons apparently were quite big in the area. So without knowing it, and I always said to Ruth, why do you like Tonteldoos so much? She said, I don't know, something about it just pulls me there. And now we think that maybe there was some...
like muscle memory or...
yeah, something. But there was something, definitely, because we both loved the farm, and we looked at a lot that we didn't love, and this one we did. So, but her grandfather's cousin is buried on this farm. And talk about plain barrel.
Yeah.
And which year was this?
What, that he was born? That he was buried here?
Yes.
1949.
Sure.
Goodness.
1949, yeah.
Okay, brilliant. So you've been here for 15 years,
yeah,
and you started Bushboys. What was here before then?
It used to be a felt school. The guy who owned it, Bezuidenhout, was very passionate about the environment, and in those days he used to get NAP government funding for the place, and his son Tolly ran the place very well. Tolly was an ex-South African Defence Force Sergeant Major, so he kind of knew how to handle people, and they ran the place for kids to come. They used to have 250 kids here at a time.
Sure.
To train them on all aspects of the environment, which is a lot of fun. And then in 94, when things started to change, old man Bezodinot, who was also a linguist, and he spoke 19 languages.
19 languages.
All the European languages, French, Portuguese, Spanish, lots of the black languages, and he also spoke Arabic. The only language he didn't speak was Mandarin. And at some point he decided he wanted to go and learn to speak Mandarin. And he went off to China and learned how to speak Mandarin, and the Chinese government employed him because he was a top advocate in his normal life. Employed him to be like an agent there because he couldn't negotiate contracts. So the place then stood empty, and we bought it. This whole valley in front here was just one huge wattle forest. It was completely overgrown. There were no roads here. There was nothing here. And we liked the place. It had everything that we wanted. So we just threw a lot of energy at it. And we wanted to do something. The roads into the area are bad. They never will be good. This is typical rural South Africa. So I like adventure biking. I always have, and we figured adventure bikers would be our prime core target market, and 4x4s and that sort of thing, obviously, but adventure bikers. So we started Bushboys, and we built this, and we refurbished 6 of the cottages and put en suites onto them and that sort of thing. And then guys used to come here and they say to us, "Don't you have like a pack of chops for us or something?" Because we've got no food. And, bikes are notoriously difficult to carry a lot of food on and this sort of thing. So eventually we decided for the adventure bike guys, we would just cater for them, because that was by far the best thing. Instead of trying to scratch around in the deep freeze to find some food. And we started to do food for them, and that proved to be popular. And that's kind of brought us to where we are now, where guys come here and we look after them completely. And it's been very successful. We've had a lot of people come through here.
And when did you build the track?
Okay, the track, like those things. A lot of guys came here, and you know what it's like. Guys get into adventure biking like at 40 because it's cool.
I identify with that.
Yeah, never came from a biking background, don't know anything about riding bikes per se, and now they've got an adventure bike, which is intimidating, it's powerful, and they go for a ride and they go around a bit of a bend and they're like, "Oh hell, I could have gone around that corner a bit faster, but now it's too late." And then something else and something else, something else. So I built the track actually to give guys a bit of low-key tuition where they could repetitively ride around the track and then get the feel of the power, feeding it on, different types of off-camber, on-camber, different surface and all that sort of thing. And it wasn't 1, 2, 3, and the guys were riding on the track and saying, "What is my time?" Was I quicker than him?
So 40 years old, but still boys.
Still boys. Believe me, I've always said, we have this button on our head. I won't tell you what I called it because it's not a polite name, but we have this button on our head that you can't see. It's invisible. But when you put your helmet on, it depresses the button, and that disengages the brain from the right hand. So the right hand then just wants to hoy it. And that's the beauty about adventure biking, is it takes you back to those carefree days. When you're on a bike, you don't really talk to other people. You can with an intercom and this sort of, you don't really communicate with other people. It's you and your bike on the road, the company and the adventure and the fun and this sort of thing. So now you're riding and you're having fun. So what does it do? It takes you back to when you were a kid. And when you were a kid, you're at your most relaxed time in life.
Yeah.
You had no responsibilities, no commitments, no major problems of any sort of kind. And this takes you back there. And that's the beauty about it. It's like scuba diving. If you ever scuba dive,
Yeah.
when you scuba dive, you cut off from the rest of the world, because there you definitely can't talk to
strap
anybody.
pushes that same button.
It does. It does. And then you just have fun. You completely disconnect. And anyway, so then we were training guys and we started timing guys. And then everybody wanted to know what is my time. So then the board came into being. Gerrit and Marianne from Middelburg very kindly made me the board, because that's the business in, and it's got magnetic strips on it, so you can write the times and change them around. And it's become hugely popular. And the funny thing is, an enormous number of guys have been on that board and gone off the board. Because they've just sunk down the line. It's
So
like
the times have been improving over the years.
the times have been improving, and also as more guys have been here to ride. The initial guys weren't particularly quick, but they were on the board.
I should have been here then.
Yeah, then quicker guys came along and took them off. And then it became a big thing to get on the board. Guys came here. I've had lots of guys come here. They just want to ride the track to see if they can get on the board. So there's obviously a certain...
A male ego.
yeah, but guys want to know, how can I still crack it? You know what I mean? Now, recently, we haven't had a lot of guys come on the top of... The bottom part of the board gets frequented, but the top part is, the times are quick now. Now to get in the top 4 or 5, you've really got to ride hard.
So you've got 3 classes on the board then?
Yeah.
It's
plastics, anything which is a dirt bike, because that's obviously a whole different kettle of fish here. And then we've got the middleweight adventure bikes, which
dual
are
sports almost.
dual sports, but like from 500, 501 up to 701.
Okay.
And then from there up to unlimited. Because obviously the heavier bikes, the bigger bikes they've got more power, but on a small track, like the track is 1.4 kilometers long, you can't really lay that power down. It just throws dirt all over the place. So the big bikes are not as quick.
Even though there's an African twin on
But
top.
that is under the adventure bikes.
But that's in the big class though.
Yeah,
it's
but
not the quickest bike though. It's not the quickest bike. If you go and look down, the plastics are the quickest.
But there must be a lot of talking about the 501. Is it a dual sport or is it a plastic?
Well, you see, again, it's a moot point, but what happens is, if a guy comes here on a bike which is kitted for adventure riding, carrying all his kit, then I make the rules and I've construed that to be an adventure bike, because he's riding it in the adventure bike capacity. If it comes here on the back of a trailer, and it's a pure out-and-out dirt bike with no kit on it, and it's stripped and all, then it's a plastic.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So
there's a bit of Uncle Joe's discretion
well,
applied.
at the end of the day, I'm an arbiter. I like to be fair, and I like to be down the line. So if I say that's an adventure bike, it's an adventure bike. If I say that's a plastic, it's a plastic, and you can take your shit and duck.
I like it.
So,
But it's good to see some old bikes on there as well. XR650s.
They're
There's an L on there and an R.
surprisingly quick. They're surprisingly quick. I rode the 1650L.
Yeah.
And it handles like a honey. And the big thing on this track, because it's tight, it's 1.4 kilometers, but it's got 11 main corners in it. You've got to carry corner speed. That's a big thing. And the 650s have a chassis which is set up to handle. That's what they do. They do particular, so they might be a bit bloody sloppy on the power.
Baja.
Yes, but they carry corner speed well, and that's all you need here. So long as you carry your corner speed, you're going to be quick. All the power in the world is not going to make any difference if you can't carry it through the corner. And it's interesting to see. So they, on this track, are very, very quick, which is, it's a nice bike.
Yeah, it's a legend of a bike, XR650. I started off on one.
So you got your brother on one now as well?
My dad was riding one over the weekend. I told you, 72 years old, went on his first bike trip on a XR650L.
I'll tell you what.
Well, mates got one now as well. I would want one back in my garage one day.
I have looked with long eyes, because I've got I'm getting old now. So I need to start looking at my 990. And the day that I can't pick that bike up anymore, when it's fallen down, then I need to start looking at a replacement. So at the moment I can still pick it up if the surface is flat and it's dry. If it's wet and slippery,
you can't pick up anything.
You can't pick up anything then. But then an XR650 becomes a very attractive proposition, because it can still ride out, it's reliable, it's got the mechanical...
It's comfortable, it's
capable,
it's everything. I don't know, the last time we were here, when you broke your ribs, Uncle Joe was circling your brother's XR650L like a vulture, and he made him promise that if he ever sells this one, that he have to give him a call. But unfortunately, Uncle Joe's second in line there.
Yeah, but it's a really capable bike. And I think also what's happened in South Africa is that the realization has come that big is not necessarily better. Everybody in this country was so in pursuit of bigger.
That's where the popularity for the GS 1200 came from.
Yes.
The 1050.
Well,
wonderful bikes, but it's massive.
The GS, I think, it owes its popularity to the long way round.
Yes.
Charlie
Boorman and
Ewan McGregor.
There's no doubt about that. That was the biggest single marketing success that BMW could ever have envisaged.
And you know, and I've watched Long Way Down, and there's one aspect of that, or Long Way Round, the first one, and they went to KTM first.
And KTM said no.
KTM said,
they looked at these guys and decided, these two idiots will never make it around the world. We're not getting involved. It'll just be embarrassing. And little did they know. It was a huge blip.
Yeah, it's probably 20 years ago. When did Long Way Round?
That was
2004?
Before, no, I think it was late 9.
Because it was the 1150 that they went around the world with. It's before the 1200.
It must have been 25 years ago, I would imagine. I'm not exactly sure. But anyway, since then, KTM was definitely behind and playing catch-up. And the BMW GS got, if you ask me, because I'm unfair advantage in terms of that terrain, because it's not really suited to that terrain, not like the KTMs are.
Yes.
No, the GS is a wonderful bike, but it has its own niche. And the pie chart comprises different niches where different bikes are suited. So the XR650, going back to that, kind of fits in a whole lot of things, providing you're not after out-and-out speed. So maybe 20 years ago you could ride around in South Africa a lot faster than you can today, but today you're not going to win. If you're doing speeds well over the speed limit, you're looking for trouble.
Yeah.
It's not clever.
No, it's not made for that. And this, coming back to the 650 as well, that's my go-to. If I speak to somebody and they say, I've got no experience, I want to get into this, it's relatively cheap. It never loses value. It is easy to ride. It is reliable. And it is the easiest thing just to get along with.
Absolutely. Well, I started off seriously adventure biking on a KLR, and I had two of them. I bought one and then I sold and I bought another one, but a brand new one the second time round. And that was nice. It was a hell of a good bike. 17-inch back wheel didn't do much for me, and the suspension was lousy, so I imported a lot of stuff from progressive springs for the front and the back and this sort of thing. But I can't do it.
Military bike.
A proper can't do it. I actually tried to buy the diesel version that they built for the United States Armed Forces, but I tried for years, and I tried really hard, and they just were not available. At that time, they weren't selling. They weren't making enough to sell that, because that was an amazing bike. It had a
diesel adventure bike through Africa.
Imagine what a conversation piece that is.
You see, the engine was developed specifically for them by, I speak under correction, but I think it was the University of Sheffield. It was one of the big universities of the UK. It was a 5-valve motor. It wasn't a diesel thumper. It was quite a decent performer. And it had to be able to cruise at 140 k's an hour with an American serviceman, Marine, with all his kit on it. That's quite a tall order. That was a sea level, obviously. So at altitude you would lose a bit, but it was normally aspirated, not a turbo motor, so it was simple, and it had to run on what they call jet fuel, which is jet A1. It's paraffin.
Avgas.
It's Avtur. Avgas is petrol, and Avtur is the diesel stuff which all the tanks run on, and the helicopters and that sort of thing. So it's a turbine fuel. So that will run on normal paraffin quite easily. All you got to do in that thing is, for the injector pump, put in a lubricant, because it's dry. Paraffin is dry. It has no lubricity in it. So you got to put some sort of oil in that. But it will run at a pinch. So if you're out riding a bike like that in the middle of nowhere and you run out of food, you can hoist paraffin in that.
It'll get you back home.
Yeah.
Brandy?
Probably. I don't know. I think you might just get sidetracked a little bit. Should be, but,
so when was it that you got involved in adventure riding?
Sure.
And before that, were you actually riding a bike?
I've been riding bikes all my life. I'll tell you how I started. When I was 12 years old, which was in 1963, My sister got a boyfriend, Anthony van Malsen, who had a helpmate trap, one of those things with a little engine on the front thing. My mother was a librarian, so she used to be working at the library, and my sister then was 15 going on 16. And Anthony and her were allowed to sit on the lounge chair on separate cushions. Okay?
On separate cushions.
On separate cushions.
No holding hands.
And we had to monitor them. Now it's her little boot. Okay, so we had to monitor them.
I smell a bribe coming.
And Anthony had this helpmate trap. So he used to rock up to our house with a full tank of petrol, say, knock yourselves out. We had a big yard, ride around the yard, and he'd go and cater with my sister in the lounge. Every time we changed riders, we'd run up and look through the window, and they'd quickly sit apart and all the rest of it. But things were quite formal in those days. But that's where I fell in love with motorbikes. And then we had this teacher, Mr. Corley, who I hated, because he told me, by the time you get old enough to ride a motorbike, there are going to be no motorbikes, there are going to be sky scooters. And I didn't want a sky scooter, I wanted a motorbike. And he said, no, it'll be sky scooters, that's where we're going. We're going to a paperless age with sky scooters. And it was 1963. Well, we haven't got away from the paper and we haven't got sky scooters yet. Anyway, so then I went to the army in 1970 and I saved all my money up. And my old man hated motorbikes, absolutely hated them, because during the Second World War he rode for about 400 meters on a Harley Davidson 750 dispatch rider's bike and fell off and broke his leg up in the Western Desert. Broke his tibia or his fibia, one of the two. But anyway, he hated motorbikes. The word was taboo. So in our family, up until I left home, didn't mention the word. So when I went to the army, saved all my back pay up, on my way back to Umtali, I stopped in Salisbury and I bought a BSA 650. Beautiful bike, ex-cop bike, with Spitfire road race cams in it. And man, I was in love with that bike. It was absolutely gorgeous. And my old man had a proper meltdown. He didn't like this thing, so he wouldn't talk to me. And I pitched up at his house one day, about 4 months after I'd bought it, and I parked it outside the back door on a Sunday, and he actually got out and he walked up and looked at it. And I looked at him and I thought, has this old man lost his marbles now? And he looked at me and he said, what is this thing about a 350? I said, that'll do fine, Dad. I wasn't close enough. I wasn't mentioning 650. So he looked at it and he said, take me for a ride on it. So I thought, on the road? I thought he'd really lost his marbles. He said, no, just around the yard. He had a huge yard. And I said, okay. Now, remember, I was like 19 years old and probably not quite well in the head, so I just started laughing. Got my old man on the back of the bike, set off round, and they had the front yard was a 60-meter wide lawn, or 70-meter wide lawn. And something just got on my shoulder and started something. And I just gave this bike a big handful across the front lawn. I thought, this is the only chance I'm ever going to get. My old man is never going to get on this bike. And I gave it this massive handful. And the bike could go quite well. And it took off across the lawn. What I forgot about was on the far side of the lawn was a big jacaranda tree, and the grass underneath it was still wet with dew. So when I got there, now doing like 50 miles an hour, and put on brakes, nothing happened. So we went screaming into the fence, and we had an old dairy alleyway between us and our neighbour, which my dad had allowed to be overgrown purposely because it kept the noise out. And our neighbour was an old man Moore, who was a real cantankerous old bugger, and he hated us. We hit this fence at 50 miles an hour. My old man shot over the top and flew right over this whole thing and landed in the flower bed where old man was tilling it with his little fork or whatever. And he was about to hit him on the head with, I think he was one of us kids. He looked at him and said, good God, Buster, that's you. What are you doing here? And that was all the time I needed. I picked myself up, extricated myself from this mesh fence, got on the bike, started, and I ducked. I never went back to see my old man for another 6 months because he wanted to kill me.
What do you think made him come around to actually ask you to go for a lift?
I never found out. He never mentioned the subject yet. I think he was just curious. And I had the bike, but it's the only time he ever mentioned it, apart from telling me that I was an absolute idiot to buy it. But I loved motorbikes. Then time went by, and Ruth and I got married. I was quite young. I was 21. She was 17.
There we go.
She was 17, so we were both filled with a certain amount of adventure, and we heard about the Buffalo Rally. And we decided, in between that, I bought a Norton 650 SS, which is a nice bike. I sold the BSA and I bought the Norton, which is a nice bike. But those Brit bikes had their own issues with reliability and oil leaks and this sort of thing. So then we heard about the Buffalo Rally in South Africa, and that just sounded like... Now remember, we had the war years on at this time.
Yeah.
So life was very kind of controlled in civilian life. In my army life, I had a lack of time because I was running around in the bush doing what I wanted to do. But heard about the Buffalo Rally, and bikes were really hard to get in Rhodesia at the time because of sanctions and this sort of thing. So I got into a queue that was 7 bikes long. I had to sell my Norton to buy a Yamaha 650 SS. The guy who owned the 650 XS had to sell that to me to buy some other bike. And it all revolved around a 750 Water Buffalo Suzuki being brought into the country for a guy in Bulawayo. And then we had this skittle effect. And eventually this bike arrived in Bulawayo, and he got it, so he sold his bike, and that started the skittle effect. And Ruth bought a 350, CB350 from...
CB350.
Yeah, beautiful bike.
Honda,
yeah. From Ian Steele. He just finished rebuilding it. He was a friend of ours. And I got the 650 XS. And I think 4 days after she got the Honda, we set off for South Africa on holiday, with the two of us and a friend of ours, Neil and Jenny, on their BMW R69, something to that effect. And we rode down to the Buffalo Rally in Port Elizabeth, which was really quite cool. We had a lekker trip, and we rode all over the country and back again. And on the way back, in Groblersdal Marble Hall, on a Sunday morning, the advance and retard mechanism on the Honda broke. It's a little fork. So it didn't advance and retard automatically. So I had to fix it somewhere. So you couldn't fix it in the slow position because then the bike backfired. So I had to fix it in the fully advanced position, or just locked it in place with a washer. But it meant when you shut the throttle, it backfired like hell. Now we're riding in the convoy in Rhodesia, which is escorted by the military, and they're warning everybody, if you hear this, don't open fire in the bush, because it's just that bike up front. And we had to ride right behind the front escort vehicle. So we rode through all the way up, and we had to go to Harare because there was no connected convoy to go to Mtali, where we wanted to go to. So we got to Harare. Now, at the end of a holiday, we were flat broke, and we were tired. We wanted to get home. And we got to Marandellas on the way back, which is about 250 odd kilometers from Mtali, and it was late in the afternoon, and we'd run out of money completely. We were flat broke. So we phoned the folks, Ruth's folks, and said, can we borrow some money? Because the old man had a share in Marandella service station. Can we fill up on the book, and we'll settle you up as soon as we get back home? Because there were no cards in those days. You either had cash in your pocket or you had no money. So they said, no, you mustn't come home. The roads are bad. There have been ambushes and all this sort of thing. You must stay the night in Marandellas. Book into the hotel, and we'll phone them and tell them we're going to settle the bill, and you can pay us back in due course. So I looked at Ruth, and I said, she looked at me and said, do you really want to stay here tonight? I said, no. She said, no, nor do I. So we filled up the bikes with petrol, and we hit the road. Now it's getting dark. And we're bombing down the road, and somewhere other side of Macheki, we come around the corner, and there's a clan truck on fire on the side of the road. And there's oaks with guns running around in the smoke and the dusk and all the rest everywhere. So now Ruth's bike was quite high for her, so she couldn't just quickly stop and do a U-turn. She looks at me and she shouts to me, what do I do? I said, just get here on my right-hand side. I'm going to get between you and the truck and just give it horns. We're just going to ride through this, because we're too close now. We couldn't stop. You didn't have time. So I didn't realize that Honda was that quick. she got down on the tank and she just gave that thing horns, and we took off. That thing was redlining, and I had a whole ass to catch up to it. And we get there. And as we get into this now, in the sort of half dark and the flames, or we see it's actually Rhodesian security forces, so it wasn't good. So thank goodness for that. They had responded to the ambush and they were there. We screamed through there at about 1,000,000 miles an hour. And it was like adrenaline. Because we were laughing like crazy. And we got back to Mtali that night. And the next morning, early, about 6:30, the phone rings at Ruth's folks' place, and it's John phoning Mary, Ruth's sister. John was her boyfriend. He says, "Was that Ruth and Joe on their bikes last night? We were responding to an ambush truck, and they came through there at about 1,000,000 miles an hour and just rode us over." And he was actually one of the guys responding, so it was quite funny. So the love of bikes was
always there.
And then,
so she was riding a CB350, and what were you on then? The Norton.
No, the 650 XS.
Oh, the XS Yamaha. And when was the first time you really got into, let's say, adventure riding, but almost self-sufficient?
Sorry, I'm a bit long-winded. Anyway, then I got involved in dirt bikes in the army, using it for rapid deployment. I was in a tracker unit, so we got these little 175 bikes, and
that's before DTs, eh?
It was a
XT.
It was a it was. Those things with that like little luggage carrier on the front, sandwich rack and a sandwich
AG. AG 200.
AG, they were 175, two strokes in those days.
Yeah, we saw those.
Yeah.
So my son was riding an AG 200 this weekend.
Okay.
On our bike trip.
Yeah.
Beautiful bike. Leave that one, it's fine.
So that showed me how bikes did off-road. And then I moved to South Africa in end of 78, 79, somewhere around there. And I got to PE in 79, and I started racing dart track on a 350 RD.
Flat track or?
No, circuit. Aldo Scribanti and East Cape and Border Series and that sort of thing. And then while I was doing that, I met guys from Rover Motorcycle Club in 1980, and I bought a Yamaha DT360, which had a hell of a powerful motor, and all it wanted to do was kill you. It had the most terrible suspension out. So I raced that for a while, and then a friend of mine who had a dealership, Lenny Smith, he got me to buy a Micro 250. And I rode the Micro 250, and then I got a 440, and then a 490, and then I got an IT 250, and a whole bunch of small bikes and that sort of thing. But I was just into off-road racing.
Until you ended up with sorry, I interrupted you now, but what is it, WR426, or was it a 450 that you did the Kalahari?
That was a 450. But then in about 1990-something, I can't remember the exact year, I got this KLR. The 650, it was the European model. I think it was European. I had the 12-litre tank on it, which was a bit of a pain in the arse. I had to change it. And then I started adventure bike riding, and that was really, really such a revelation, because all of a sudden, and I fitted that big 32-litre plastic tank on a KLR. You could ride from here to Cairo and back again without refueling. That was lekker. I did lots of trips on that bike. Went all over Botswana, Namibia, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, all over the place. It was a fantastic bike. And that's when I did the suspension and that sort of thing.
What was the most memorable trip that you did on the KLR 650? The best adventure, for whatever reason?
The one that sticks out.
Probably, because a lot of them were really good. I did one with Boshoff Steenekamp. He was on a 650 GS, whatever they call that thing with the aluminium handlebars. It was his wife's bike, because he had a 1200 or a 1200. And I said to him, it was December. So you know what it's like, what happens. I'm a guy, I like to plan and organize things and get things going. So I tell guys I'm going to do an adventure bike trip in December. Okay, we're in. Organize a trip. Dude, I don't want to. You got 10 or whatever guys. So then 2 weeks before the event, you got 10 guys. Then 4 days before the event, you got 6 guys. Yeah. Anyway, so eventually when we left here, we rode up to Pafuri, and I organised with a guy at Pafuri River Camp to ferry us through the park on his Land Rover, because you can't ride a bike through the park. We had 4 guys left of the original 10. And by the time we got to Pafuri to clear customs, we had 2 guys left. One guy crashed and one guy's bike broke down. The whole subframe broke off because he had too much shit on his bike. So there was Boshoff and myself left. And I'd warned Boshoff, fit knobblies because it's the rainy season. And he thought, these tyres are good, they'll do fine. Which they didn't. So we had a bit of an issue. He fell off a few times, and but we got to the crossing at Mapai on the Limpopo, and the river was starting to come up. So I looked around.
Was there a ferry back then?
No, there was no ferry. There was nothing there. So I looked around and I found a youngster with a Scotch cart. You know what a Scotch cart is? Pulled by 2 oxen. And I said to him, "Can you take us to the other side?" So he said, "Yeah, sure, you can." So loaded my bike and we got it across. Offloaded it, went back, and the river was coming up. As you looked at it, it was coming up and up. He said, no, he's not going back in. I said, no, you can't do that. My bike's here now on that bank, and Boshoff is on this bank, and you can't do that. Load the bike, we're going. So I've got a beautiful photograph of Boshoff sitting on his bike in the back of the Scotch cart with the wheels up to the axle in water. On the back of the Scotch cart. And the oxen were walking on their back legs, like this, being beaten with a whip by this youngster to get to the other side.
Needless to say, he didn't go back to the
He
bike.
didn't go back. He was a bit miffed because by the time
we spent summer on the other side of the road.
By the time we got Boshoff to that side, those oxen, I promise you, they couldn't have made another 35 seconds. They would have drowned. So we got him out and got the bike off and all the rest of it. And off we went. And we rode all the way through all the bush, through Banyin, down through Zanav National Park. We came round the one corner, and this track we were riding on hadn't been used by a vehicle for I don't know how long. There were no wheel tracks, and it turned into an old tweespoor with a single footpath down the middle. And we got to a place where there was a piece of Marata corrugated iron wired across the road, blocking the road, and the footpath just went around, and we rode around it, and we looked back on the road we just come on and said, Perigo Minas, the road was mined. Don't travel down this road, which was quite common in those days in Mozambique. We never hit anything. And
Exhibit A.
Yeah. So then we eventually went through Mabote all over the place. We tried to cross the Save River. It was in flood. And the guy with the little boat there wouldn't take us. He said, no, it's too big. So we went to Vilanculos. And we spent a bit of time riding around there. And then we were sitting at this little cafe above the Mokokwe Harbour. And I looked up. Now, I know that area well. I've been going to Mozambique since I was a kid. I looked up, and there was this funny blue-black line across the sky, low, coming towards us. It looked like weather, but there was a lot of cloud around and this sort of thing. But this line was blue-black. And there was a young Safa there running this place. And I said to him, what is that? That looked real. It was coming. You could see it coming. He said, oh, that's probably the cyclone. I said, what? No, the cyclone. I said, no, you're shitting me, man. I said, the boss will come, let's pay. We've got to get out now. He said, no, I haven't paid. I said, forget it. And we paid, and we jumped on our bikes, and we took off. And the distance from Vilanculos to the main tar road, to the Ep.1, is about, I don't know, 12 kilometers.
Yeah, it's
whatever.
not that far.
It's not that far, no. You should have called me.
No, man.
Hello.
Hi.
How are you?
How are you?
Good, and you?
Good.
It weighs a hell of a lot.
How are you doing?
Very good, and
Very nice seeing you again.
Yeah. Hi.
How are you?
Very good, and
Yeah, it's
you?
been a while.
Yeah.
Since our first time last year, I didn't make it all the way here.
Yeah, I'm still
Just up
actually
on-
quite
just
pleased to
on
hear you were coming in a bucky this time.
Can we just pause while I
Yeah, of course.
do the fire?
Yeah, let's do it.
Uh, Sorry.
So we just had a short break.
Just a short break.
Short break, making a fire, almost ready to braai.
Yeah.
And where were we?
Vilonculos in a cyclone.
We're leaving Vilonculos and
Back to the A1.
yeah. EN1.
Yes.
So we got onto the EN1 in torrential rain. But I mean, like you can't imagine what it was like. It wasn't so much wind, there was a bit of wind, but the rain was unbelievable. Now, you know how close it is to Mashish. Okay? It's not far. It's normally about a 3-hour drive.
Yes.
2.5, 3-hour drive, depending on when the road was good. We got to the EN1 at about 7:20 in the morning, and we got into Mashish at 6 o'clock that night. There were times when it was raining so hard and there was so much water, you couldn't see where the road had gone to. There was just water everywhere. My KLR cut out 3 times just from water. I don't know why, it just stopped running. And eventually we got to Mashish, and at Mashish there's a ferry point that goes across to the other side, and there's a little cafe there. Little restaurant type thing. And we got there and the place was open, it had a roof and it was dry, and we just parked the bikes outside and we walked inside to bring cerveja. Yeah. So we sat there and we ate frango, frango is chicken, but it's a cockerel. They didn't have any chicken. They had frango, which is a cockerel, which is nice. Piri, and at 11 o'clock that night they said they want to close. So we said, no, you can't close because we have nowhere to sleep. So either you find us somewhere to sleep, or we're going to stay here all night, and if we stay here all night, then you're actually going to stay here all night and serve us, which I didn't think was a good idea. So the one waiter went hurtling off, and he came back about 10 minutes later. It was still raining, like you can't believe. And he said, yeah, he's got a place just up the road. And we followed him up on the bikes, and it turned out to be a really nice little overnight accommodation place. Parked the bikes on the veranda and slept there, and we left at 6 the next morning in torrential rain. Still bucketing down. Rode through to the border. We crossed Rosano Garcia like drowned rats. We were so sick and tired of it. And halfway to Nelspruit, we were in 34 degrees C temperature. And boiling hot.
From Mashish to Rosano Garcia.
It was raining. It rained non-stop. But from...
That's quite a distance.
Yeah. The day we hauled. It wasn't raining as hard as it had been the day before, but it was still bucketing down. But when we left Rosano Garcia to go to Nelspruit, halfway, the rain stopped and the sun came out, and it was 34 degrees C. By the time we got to Nelspruit, we were dying of heat stroke.
And so how many days was it then? I mean, from Mapai,
we were about 10 days on the whole trip. But what a trip.
We've travelled those roads from Mapai to Mapo, to Zanaf,
Vilonculos,
Actually,
Nasuru.
Yeah. And it's hard going with a bike. Even modern bikes today, it's.
We didn't really have so much of a problem. The only problem we had was when the roads were better used and they were very sandy. Bossel fell off all the time. 19-inch front wheel and the wrong tyres. So we just let the tyres down hell of a soft so that he had lots of traction, as much as he could get, and that kind of solved that problem.
When was this?
That was quite a while ago. Must have been 20 years ago. More, 20-something years ago.
And then from the KLR, you went up?
From the KLR, I got a 640 KTM, which is a really nice adventure bike.
Twin light. That's the one they did the Dakar with for several years.
Yeah. 640 KTM was a really, really nice bike.
I'll get another one. The 640, yeah?
Yeah, that was a lekker bike. And on that bike, I did also lots of trips. Went all over the place with that bike.
Wasn't that the Hunter's Road story you just told when you...
No, there I went on the KLR.
Oh, okay.
Michael was on the
640.
Yeah. We did a trip once to Moz. There's an old fort up on a hill overlooking the Zambezi River, built by a Portuguese army deserter from the old days. And Ruth came in the Land Cruiser as our backup, and then we rode bikes up there. And we also went in through Mozambique. And
it's not Villa no Sofala.
No, long way past it. I'll show you on a map. It's actually a hell of an interesting place to go and visit. You can still see the old gun ports there up on the hill overlooking. And this guy, he was what they call a mulatto, a coloured guy. And the normal Portuguese guys kind of gave him a bit of a hard time. He's a lieutenant, very charismatic guy. And the Zambezi in those days, coming in from Kiliman, was the main trade route into the interior. Because the channel in those days, before they built Cabora Bassa and Kariba, used to run very definitely out at Kiliman. And they all went out up there. And so he then deserted from the Portuguese army in tent because they gave him a hard time, and he built this fort just downstream overlooking the river where he made them pay. It was like a toll road. He made them pay toll. And these ships used to sail up and down there because it's quite navigable up to Tet. And he used to extract toll. So one day, a whole lot of merchants coming up the river with quite a well-armed force decided we're not paying toll today. So they had a bit of a barney with him, and he killed off a whole bunch of them, and then he got sharpened wooden stakes all along the river, and he stuck these sticks up these dead oaks' backsides as a reminder to everybody why you should pay toll.
So it's probably effective.
It was fairly effective, yeah. People paid attention. Anyway, so then the Portuguese army from Portugal decided, no, we're going to take this guy out. And they sent an expedition force against him. So there were 900 soldiers still with him, those old metal helmets, and he killed 500 of them, and he stuck them on sticks as well, all in their regalia. As a reminder to the military and to the King of Portugal not to come and
mess with his business.
To mess with him, yeah. Anyway, so now we're on this trip up there with the bikes and all the rest of it, and the KTM, we got to Espongabera, and the needle in the carburetor broke off. Snapped at the little circular pinpoint. So that was it. Bike didn't run. So we had a winch on the Land Cruiser. We put the cable up over a tree branch, winched the bike up into the air, up against the bottom of the tree branch, reversed the Land Cruiser in underneath it, and lowered it down on the roof rack. And we drove through to Chipinga on the Zim side, where a friend of mine, Aldaf Oorendal, had a farm. And we'd arranged to spend the night there with him. So we get there, and I'm looking at his workshop, and I see he's got a big lathe standing in the corner. So I check his lathe out, and I get an idea, and I said to him, have you got any brazing rods? He said, yeah. I said, can I have one? Said, absolutely. So we got this piece of brazing rod, and we got the 2 bits of broken needle out of the carburetor, and we got a file. We stuck it in the chuck of the lathe, and we filed. Took us about, 35, 40 minutes of work, matching it up all the time with the broken bits. And then eventually we got the profile to be almost perfect. Cleaned it up with a bit of fine sandpaper, and then I took a bit of broken hacksaw blade, which we ground to make a cutting tip, and I just cut one groove in it for the needle, because we knew where the position was then. And we put the little thing in, dropped it in, fired the bike up, ran perfectly. And Michael sold that bike about, 5 years later, still with that needle in it. Yeah. Very lekker.
On a farm lane.
Yeah. So you can make a plan when you want to.
Yeah, you can always make a plan. I think that's the main thing, and we touched on it earlier, or just spoke about it, is There's no more adrenaline in everyday life. There's no more excitement or...
That's, to me, as we mentioned earlier when we were talking about it, is the essence of adventure biking. That's why it's called adventure biking. It's not dual sport riding, it's adventure biking in this country, amongst these guys. And Saffers like adventure because we are by nature an adventurous bunch, and it's a natural filter. If you're the kind of guy who gets on an adventure bike, you want to go do stuff. And a certain percentage of those guys want to go off and ride. And a bike allows you that freedom of movement. Takes you all over the place. They're fast, you think about it. They're fast, they're reliable, they can get into places where with a vehicle it might take you 3 times longer.
Yes.
Quite easily. And they're in and out. And the thing is, like in countries like Mozambique, you can buy petrol anywhere. If you know how to look for it. We got sent once to do a game count with Battliers when I was flying for them in Banyin. And the guy who was sending us, Jeremy, said to me, when you get to the Shell Ultra City at such a place, hang a right and go through to Pia Cabral. So we rode 500 k's up the road, and we got there, and there was this big tree with a big fallen down branch, and there were about 25 different sized containers on it, all full of petrol. And I said to my buddy who was with me, Richard, I said, there's a Shell Ultra City. That's the most big Ultra City.
We say there's 3 things you can get anywhere nowadays, in every single town, wherever we go, in every single town in Africa, you can get fuel, beer, and airtime.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You might not get food or meat, but you will get beer and airtime.
But you'll get something to eat, though.
You will get something to eat.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing about adventure biking, and you get to places that you would never otherwise see. We did a trip a couple of years back in 2014, up through Mozambique and then in through Chikwalakwala into the bottom part of Zim and then all the way up, hugging the border. Fantastic, fantastic country. And just by the by, there's an old restaurant in Chikwalakwala on the railway line. Beautiful, upstairs at the station. And you arrive there, and it's like in the middle of rural Africa. And
white tablecloths.
Stunning white tablecloths, beautiful old decor, lacquer greys. The menu wasn't that advanced, but I mean, they had pretty chicken and cold cerveja and stuff like that. And there was lots of petrol available across the street and that sort of thing. And we had to go and find the immigration officer because he was visiting somebody because they hadn't had somebody through the border for 3 days and that sort of thing. So that's all part of it.
Part of it, absolutely.
But that's the beautiful thing about Africa is that strict rules. In rural Africa, they're not there.
I've got to tell you something about that trip. We get to the border at Bafuri, and my son, who's now riding my old 640, gets there and he says, you know what? I said, what? He said, I left the registration papers in Joburg. And now we're at the border and they've got to present your registration book. So we said, don't worry, we'll make a plan. Now there are 10 of us on bikes. So, and you know what, bikers all look the same when you've got a helmet on and jackets and this and getting all vermeling around. We smuggled him out of South Africa into Mozambique. And we rode through up to Chikwalakwala and we created a little diversion with the one guy so that my son could go through without being inspected for anything. And he went through into Zim. And we smuggled him into Zim without any papers. We went up to Manica and we smuggled him out of Zim back into Mozambique without any papers, back to Pafuri and back into South Africa with no registration papers. So you can make a plan.
There's always a plan.
Similar thing happened to us. We were our very first Botswana trip, and I went on my Husky 501, and it's off-road. I haven't got indicators on it. There's no papers for it, anything like that. And we come to the border post, and Johan says, "What are we going to do here?" I says, "No,
figure it out.
We'll go." And he comes with the XR and his plates and everything, and they write him and it's third party. He pays his third party, and they come to this one. No number plate. No, hasn't got any number plates. Okay.
He doesn't even have to buy bloody insurance to be on the road.
Yeah, because it's not on the road.
Yes. He said, where are you going to ride? He says, I'm just going to ride next to the road. Okay, that's fine. Just stay off the,
But you see,
the blacktop.
that's actually why it's so lucky to be in this part of the world. Because we've got all these rules and regulations and things like that, but in that kind of scenario, they get meant to fit the scenario.
Makes more sense.
I read a book that was quite impactful in my life. It's a book called The Trouble with Africa.
Yes.
I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
I've read it.
By Vic Gers.
Yes.
And it's a brilliant book. It's about this German guy that came to Johannesburg. He studied art, if I remember correctly, and fell in love with Africa. And then, I can't remember exactly how, but they ended up in South Luangwa running a safari camp. And he was always comparing his life with his brother's life in Germany. And then while he was running the safari camp and all the stories of the safari camp, he spoke about, going over to the US to sell some of his art as well. And it came through a few times in his book where he said, I've got a new Land Cruiser, it's 10 years old. But that's his new Land Cruiser. His old Land Cruiser is 30 years old.
Okay.
And his brother buys a new Volvo or BMW or whatever every few years, a new suit every 6 months. He's got insurance for every single eventuality that might be bestowed upon him. And if you drive in the US, you drive through a 2-mile piece of road and it tells you to change your speed 6 times because there's a school or something. And one of the troubles with Africa, he said, was the somewhat lenient relationship with regulation and law.
Authority.
With authority.
Yeah.
Even the enforcers has a somewhat lenient relationship with it. But it's Africa. And that's the absolute beauty of it. I mean, I lived in Australia. I absolutely hated it because it's so regulated.
Yeah.
And now I'm like the happiest guy alive to be in Africa and experience it for what it's worth in South Africa.
We got stopped in a roadblock one day in Zim, and they could be quite difficult at times. And the woman came to me and said to me, "And when did you bring me from South Africa?" So I looked at her. I looked at her name plate. I said, Miss Maponya, did you send me an email asking for something? She looked at me and said, no. I said, hey, I'm sorry, I can't bring something just for anybody. You must send me an email. Next time I'll bring you something. Big laugh, and off we went. You just turn it into a bit of a joke.
Yeah, and I think after, your 640, you went up to when did you end up with a KTM?
Okay, well then I bought another KLR, which I had, and then I went on that trip in 2014 to Moz with Mark Taylor, who you know, and Mark Taylor was riding a 990. Yes, and that did it for me. That absolutely did it for me. That bike of his was so lekker. It really was. Everything about it was just so nice. So I came back to Joburg and I sat on an R, and it was so tall I couldn't touch the bloody ground with both feet. So I thought, I'll never get to ride a KTM. And then a little while later I was at KTM in Joburg, and there was a second-hand 990 on the floor, and I sat on it and I could touch the ground, both sides. So I said to the salesman, what's with this bike? How come the seat is so low? He said, no, that's just the normal standard. The S and the R are tall. I said, just take it off the floor. Push it there in the corner and take the sign, put it, say sold. I went home, got my finances organized, came back and bought it, paid cash for it, and had it ever since. And I can't remember exactly when that was. That must have been 15, 16 years ago.
And you still have it?
I've still got it. I love that bike. I bought it on...
But it's an iconic bike, isn't it? The 990. It's. I think it'll go down in history as probably one of the best adventure bikes.
A 990.
I don't think they've been able to replicate or duplicate.
No,
that
well, they
since.
won't. They never will because of all the restrictions on fuel and outlets and all this sort of thing. But also, if you remember, the 950 was built for Dakar racing.
Yes.
So it was essentially a race bike built, which they then adapted to the road, if you know what I mean. It wasn't a road bike that they adapted to go and race. It was built for racing. And then that was in the 950 guys, and then they decided to sell it, and they sold it as a 950 Adventure.
Yeah.
So the whole geometry of that bike is set up to handle high-speed off-road. And it's got good suspension, it's got good everything. The only thing they can't overtake is a petrol pump, because they're quite thirsty. But if you ride a 990 like they're meant to, or a 950 like they're meant to, of course they use fuel, because they're very quick on the throttle, very crisp. Super bike. I mean, I love that bike of mine, and I've had it for 65,000 odd kilometers now that I've done on it.
And on the 990, I believe that the guys from Yamaha copied the 990 in the T7, just made it a little bit smaller, maybe a bit more novice friendly.
Docile.
More docile, but
Yeah.
you don't get close to the Austrian power. But I think it's a copy of that, and that's why the T7 is seeing the success.
The T7 also, with all of these bikes, and it's a very real problem when you look at it, with a lot of these high-tech bikes, when you buy them, you need to buy a full maintenance plan, which is going to cost you a lot of money because they are enormous, terrifyingly expensive to service and maintain and just keep going. And I don't want to brand bash at all because that's not my scene, but they're horrifically expensive to maintain. The T7 is a relatively uncomplicated bike. Its maintenance costs are cheap. So it's all very well. It's like having the CRF Honda 450 made an enormous amount of power, but you had to tune the thing every time you started it. So if you had a whole bunch of mechanics working for you and a sponsor, it was a wonderful bike. If you look at the WR450 on the other hand, which was Yamaha's offering, that was a much less powerful bike. Still made a huge amount of power. But it was relatively mechanically uncomplicated, and you didn't have to reshim it every 5 minutes and this sort of thing. I raced a 450 for years that I bought new in 2007, and a fantastic bike.
Yeah, that's actually one of the topics we want to come to is your 450 on the Kalahari Rally, and sorry to bring age in it again, but at the age you were when that happened in 2019. 2018.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what happened. I always wanted to do a rally. Every one of us, if you ride an adventure bike, you ride a dirt bike, you ride any sort of a bike on the dirt, Dakar is the pyramid.
Yeah.
That's the absolute cathedral of all of it. So I wanted to do a rally. So I got a bike sorted out and I entered for Amageza in 2016. And not a bike-related thing. 4 days before Amageza was due to kick off, everything was ready. My entry was in, paid, the whole thing, everything was done. I ended up in ICU in Johannesburg, which was a bit of a rough deal. And the race came and went, and I missed out on it. So then I was broken. I was gutted because that was my rally chance gone. And then the guy who put Amageza on got killed in a gyrocopter accident. So that was the end of rally, and that was the only rally in South Africa at the time. Then in 2017, it was about late 2017, I heard Kalahari Rally is coming into being with Garth Roberts in Mafeking. So I just said to Ruth, that's it, done deal, I'm entering. I had no idea how, what, didn't matter, but I said, I'm going to enter. And I went down to the pub here in Tonteldoos, and Peter McBride owned the pub in those days, and I said to him, have you heard about the Kalahari Rally? It's coming next year. I said, I've entered, I'm looking for pit crew. He said, I'm in. Right, no hesitation. So we shook on it right there and then. He said, right, we're in. So then we had to start getting organized. So we started building this WR 450, and I'd never rallied, I'd never navigated, I didn't know anything about it. I knew absolutely nothing about it. So it was quite a...
At the age of?
67.
67. Yeah. Entering your first rally?
At 67.
Never too old to do new things.
No, you must never let age put you off. Don't ever listen to anybody when they say, aren't you too old for that? Because you're not.
No.
I won't tell you now, but I can tell you how an much older guy than me who riding a bike inspired me. And I shook hands with him at the time in Zambia, and I just said to him, I don't know who you are, but how old are you? And he said, I am 78, I think he was. And he was riding an XR 500 like a hooligan. I said, I just hope I can be like you when I'm your age. His name was Joe McGregor Brooks. Fantastic guy. Absolutely incredible guy. But anyway, so you must never let age put you off. So we started building the bike, and I bought a second-hand bike, and I bought navigation equipment, and we put it all together. And 4 days before the rally started, we got everything finished. That was it. I'd never navigated a meter.
But your military navigation and that must have come.
No, but it's so I learned it all off the internet. All your waypoints and things like you got to learn what all these symbols mean, because each symbol has got a meaning, and there's no explanation. You've got to learn it all. Now you've got to do all this while you're riding down the road. So I just spent a long time learning on the computer what all these things meant. I printed them all out, memorized them. I had a whole little card thing in a shoebox. Ruth used to pull them out and check me, and I used to answer it because I had to know. But I'd never actually used them to follow a sequential string. So that was a bit of a scary thing. And so Pete and I ended up in Mafeking, and I went and I entered. And when Garth realized that I was actually the entrant and not somebody's opa, he turned around to his wife and he said, yeah, if that old man manages to finish the prologue, it'll be incredible.
No.
He told me this at the prize giving. He said, I don't know what he's doing here. So anyway, I wasn't fazed by that, because you must never let shit like that worry you. So we got lined up at the start, and you talk about dry mouth. Man, they're counting down. Yeah, now I've got to go and do it. I've never done this before. I have no idea what's going to happen next. And I've looked at all these stuff. They gave us a road book with all these things on it. And it was a very busy road book. So there were like 500 waypoints a day. So we'd have 2 rolls of paper, which you had to stop halfway and change because it was too big to fit on the road book holder. And I was seriously intimidated. I started to really wonder what I was doing there. And they had this big, like, pump-up thing, Red Bull racing type thing. And this was real now. Lights, go! And off I go. I went down the road. I just watched it roll. They went down the and they turned right, and I went, and I got lost. Because I forgot to look at the road book. I was so busy waving to all the people. I was so excited. And I got lost. So I stopped, hell of a crestfallen. Turned around, went back to where I realized I'd made the wrong turning. And the guys were saying, yeah, you go this way, you go that way. I said, no, relax. And I zoned out completely. And then I just started navigating. I just followed the waypoint by waypoint by waypoint. And I'm
ticking the boxes, so to say.
Ticking the boxes. And I did it probably a lot more cautiously than a lot of other guys who had done it before. So I navigated meticulously. Then they had these funny little GPS coordinates every now and then. We had no idea what they meant. I asked Peter when I got back that afternoon, what are these? No idea. But we were busy, didn't have time to find out what they were. I just carried on navigating meticulously. And I actually only got lost once more, because not so much I lost, but there was a bit of an error. But I navigated flawlessly. So what happened was, because it's a tortoise and hare scenario, because I was going a little bit slower than some of the fast guys, I ended up going faster. We had the one guy, I don't want to mention any names because it was quite funny, but he'd pass me at like 1,000 miles an hour, 15 times a day. And he was a Dakar aspirant. And I said to him, you must slow down, bud. Navigate. No, but I'm having so much fun. I said, well, this is a rally. Unless you're going where you know you're going, this is not an off-road race. You've got to navigate. So I navigated. And cut a long story short, I did better and better and better. The first day I had a problem with my charging system, which I didn't know it had that on the Yamaha, so I managed to get that fixed. Very fortunately, one of the other guys on a Yamaha told me how to look for an issue, which I did, and turned all the extra lights off and stuff like that, so it didn't use as much power, because it was misfire. I wouldn't go more than 60 k's an hour. So I got that sorted out, and then that day my exhaust header broke off.
Ooh.
And man, I promise you got no idea. I wired it back onto the bike. I stole the wire off a fence and wired it back on and all the rest of it. But the noise, after a couple of hours of riding like that, I was deaf for 2 days afterwards. And we got back that night and went to the Renault team who had a TIG welder, and we welded the thing back together again, and then the bike ran perfectly. So my best placing on the last day was 6th overall. So by then I'd got the navigation kind of sorted out and I was going quite well. And I managed to finish overall 11th. Overall 11th, yeah. Mostly because of consistent navigation. That's what a rally is all about. It doesn't matter how fast you can ride. If you don't know where you're going to, you may as well not be there. So it's a question of understanding the nav, and I was very pleased. And that, because it was a Dakar qualifier, I qualified for Dakar had I wanted to go at the age of 67, which is the oldest qualifier in the world. So, and I don't think that's likely to be taken away from me in a hurry.
No, absolutely not.
No. But it was a lot of fun. It was huge.
How many days?
It was 6.
6 days.
3,760 odd kilometers. My longest day in the Dagterbos was 15 hours on the bike. So that was quite a long day, and hot. So,
but what happened with the Kalahari Rally after that? Or was it, so that was 2018,
2019, and then COVID. And what happened, COVID actually screwed up a lot of things. It completely screwed up Kalahari Rally, because the overseas guys who had been using Kalahari Rally as a pre-run for Dakar wouldn't come here in case all their stuff got impounded because of COVID. So they wouldn't come here. So and the cost of putting the rally on is enormous. Garth put a lot of his own money, a huge amount, a staggering amount of his own money, into financing it to get it running, hoping that by the 3rd year he would have achieved sufficient overseas entries to make it worthwhile. Because you've still got to have the same number of medics and the same number of this and the same number of that, whether you've got 20 entrants or 200 entrants. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You need a certain critical mass.
Yeah, that fixed cost is there.
Yes. And with the COVID restriction on him, then it didn't happen. So then he put it on again in 2021. We went back in 2021. I took 25 adventure bikers down there to go and ride the adventure bike route, just to try and give him some financial input to help balance the costs. But after that he said it's not worth it. It's a
pity.
It takes his whole year, his whole life.
Replanning.
Organized. And there's a lot of people involved who were helping him, and it's a big commitment, and they just weren't getting the entries because of this overseas issue with COVID and the rest of it. So they cancelled it. And
yeah, that's very unfortunate.
Very unfortunate, because it's a fantastic event, beautifully
There's
run.
not many left, to be honest. Is there any Dakar qualifiers left?
Not in South Africa.
Not in South Africa.
No.
I know William Avant. I'm not sure if I pronounce it.
Avenant. He rode with us at 2018. That's why I met Willem.
He finished
this year as a rookie.
This year.
As a rookie.
Yeah, and he did very well. He qualified for a couple of American races now as well.
He is the Baja Rally director. Willem's a hell of a switched on guy. He really is a fantastic guy.
You'll revive that, or try to revive
No, because he's living in the States now. His wife is an American. Julie's an American. And he's living there now. He's obviously made that his base of operations, because he ran that whole thing, Decoding Dakar, that whole warm up to him getting to Dakar to raise money, because I mean Dakar's expensive. But Willem is a very methodical guy, very organised. He's probably your age. Lucky guy, fantastic guy. I really, really enjoyed him. And Kalahari 2018 was his baptism of fire, as was Ross Branch's. And that's another guy. You know, that's where I met Ross. And Lyndon Poskett was like the invited overseas guest for the 2018.
Yeah.
He was like the big name.
Yeah.
And Lyndon is
He had that races,
racing to places.
Races to places.
Races to places, yeah. Very knowledgeable guy, very switched on, big background in Dakar and all this sort of thing. So they invited him to come. And he said to Ross, follow me and I'll kind of show you around. Well, I think it was on day one. They were hauling, and Lyndon is fast, make no mistake.
We actually had a conversation about Lyndon. The guy that took Lyndon to Angola on that Races to Places, his guy, the Henku
Meyer.
Yeah.
We met Henku. Johan and
No, another name,
and Henku took him, and Henku told us that Lyndon is Henku
Meyer,
Lyndon is some rider.
Yeah, no, he's fast, make no mistake. But anyway, on day one, they were hauling at about 160 k's an hour, and Ross hit a gum tree root and crashed. But he crashed himself broken, bruised from here to there, and he looked like death. And I thought, oh, well, that's it, he's out. Man, that boykie is tough.
He's tough as nails.
He is tough. He just got himself up the next morning. He was on the start line, and he went and he won the rally. He kicked ass there like you can't believe. That to me, and I looked at him there, and I said to Peter, because Peter knows Ross well from Kleinsof. They used to race motocross in Joneng. And I said, that guy's got to go on to win Dakar. So last year he came second. This year he unfortunately crashed out.
It's heartbroken for him.
Yeah, but Ross is definitely Dakar winning material.
Absolutely.
He's
and everybody
got
was
what it takes.
questioning him when he got to the team where he is now. But I mean, how well are they doing?
Yeah, exactly.
They are
But you see, it's again, it's that snooty look down your nose thing.
Yes.
Because Hero had a contract for 5 years with Honda, and they learned a lot about quality building.
Yeah.
And then it didn't terminate. It came to a normal end. They parted quite amicably, and they went off on their own. And then they took the next step was to market in that market to develop a global footprint. So those guys are not amateurs.
No.
They are really good. Years ago, Simon Fourie went off to China on a visit to one of these factories where they make like 250s and this sort of thing, with a whole bunch of other bike people from all over the world. They got invited. And they were in the one factory, and they were looking at a bike that was being built there, and the engineer came and said to him, what do you think? Give me your opinion. And he said, look, the bike looks right, but the welding spatter is bad. Never going to be acceptable in the South African market. That you must fix up. Now, in the corporate world, that's like a 2-year fix. Documentation and procedures and paper and all the rest of it. So the guy said, okay, fine. So they carried on with their tour, and they were sitting in the canteen at lunchtime, and the same engineer came back to Simon and said, come and have a look. And they took him back down to the welding of the frames. They said, what does it look like now? They'd reset everything.
Like that?
Just like that. And they were perfect. So when you're up against that, and where are all these bikes getting made nowadays? Everywhere's got Bajaj in India is a partner in KTM, and this and Kova and all the rest of it. These oaks are not playing around. And people, it's all very well. Do you remember, I grew up on British motorbikes, BSAs and Nortons and Matchlesses and Triumphs, and then Jap crap came along.
Jap crap.
Who are you riding a piece of Jap crap until 1969 when the CB750 hit the streets? And that just absolutely changed the whole world of biking. That bike was such an icon.
It was a Harley beat, and Harley in those days were
Yeah, but the CB750 didn't leak oil. It had an electric start. It did everything. I think the first ones had a kickstart, but they very quickly put an electric start on them. But it did everything perfectly. My XS650 was a copy of a Brit bike. It didn't leak oil, had electric start, didn't break down. It had an electronic ignition, not points, or a magneto that gave trouble or had to be remagnetized. It just did the job.
Yeah.
So the Chinese are coming. And anybody...
Absolutely.
I'm not sure exactly the numbers of the Kobe and this year's Dakar, but I promise you they'll be double next year.
Yeah. Look, they had their teething problems, which is to be expected. Everybody does that. And another one to watch is CF Motor.
Oh, CF Motor, that new one they brought out, the MT450.
Yeah.
I saw one yesterday.
Serious?
Yeah.
I haven't seen one yet.
Well, I saw it in our estate there, so it was probably on the way to UB Leisure. But I've heard just great things about it.
Yeah.
A 450 adventure bike at 120,000 Rand.
Exactly. You see, that's the thing. Now, it won't stay there for long, because as soon as they get really good, the prices will obviously start to climb up, because
Like
everybody
they
wants
quad
to make
bikes,
money.
like they side-by-sides, they start
Yeah.
cheap.
Yeah.
Now they're Polaris.
But the CF Motor, to me, that's a cheap Cove, because the Covers are quite expensive. They're 200 and something.
It's 200 grand, but it's for a Dakar bike.
Dakar
Yeah.
spec
When you
450,
compare,
yeah.
the KTM is 400 grand.
Exactly.
Something you said earlier,
Yeah.
You said about flying over Banin, or I remember you've touched on it previously as well, and yes, adventure biking is one part of it, and it's great.
A Microlight is an aerial adventure bike. I promise you. I started flying I've always had an interest in archaeology and the early settlement of Africa, by who actually came here. And I wanted to go and explore Mount Gorongosa, because I believe that was a link, because there's people, the Malayo-Polynesian people came to Madagascar and then sailed from Madagascar to the mainland, and in those days they were excluded by the Zambezi Pungwe Delta from Kiliman to Beira. That was just a big swampland, so they either had to go north of that or south of that. And the Buzi River coming in at Sofala is just below Beira, and that was the southernmost extremity of the trade winds, which is what they used to sail on. So if they come up the Buzi or the Pungwe River, where would they have gone to? Mount Gorongosa sits at 7,600 feet at the top and at about 400 feet above sea level at the bottom. It's right there. And there's a channel that runs from the Shiri River straight across country from the Great Rift Valley that joins into the Pungwe River. Okay, now that's very much silted up now, because as a result of the Kabora Bassa controlling the flood, it doesn't happen so much anymore. But when I was 12, we went up that from the Pungwe all the way up into the Zambezi by boat with Norman Lunderstead fishing. He was our next door neighbor when I was a kid. So I now wanted to go and explore the top of Gorongosa Mountain to look for ruins, which I thought would link me to the Malayo-Polynesians from Madagascar to Inyanga. So I borrowed a black guy who spoke the local lingo and Portuguese from a friend of mine in Mutare, and we went there in 1991. 1991, I think it was, 1991. And that was a hell of a story in itself, but I ended up getting captured or taken hostage, or whatever you want to call it, by Renamo in the middle of the night.
In 91.
Yeah. Fortunately, without knowing it, I'd given a lift, quite fortuitously, to their chief agricultural procurement officer, and given him a lift, which is where I happened to be sleeping on his veranda, in this little old bombed out ex-trading store place at the foot of the Mount Gorongosa. And they pitched up there, and the guy that I'd given a lift to, when I woke up, I was sleeping underneath a mozzie net on the front stoop. He just said to me, Garapasi, just stay down. And these guys are quite hostile. They obviously wanted to rob me because they had nothing and take all my stuff. And this, calmed them down, and eventually we became quite pally, and things ended well. But I couldn't climb the mountain. There were too many anti-personnel mines on it. They wouldn't let me go up the mountain. There were literally thousands upon thousands of anti-personnel mines that had been air-seeded onto the mountain by the Zimbabwe Air Force Kaza aeroplane.
So they can't get a vantage point.
So that Renama, who used it as their base, couldn't move freely. So they just built bamboo walkways to get away from it. But the mountain was full of things. So I decided then I was going to learn to fly. So I came back. And I looked around. I'd already tried skydiving, and I wasn't hell of impressed with that because it took too long to do nothing. You spent all day sitting around, you got one jump, and you sat around all day. So that, as a beginner at Freefall Factory in Polton. I think we better go look at that fight. Can we just...
Let's do it.
In true Bushboys fashion, we were spoiled with a spread of note. With the fire burning, chops, vors, fillet, burning on the fire, bride to perfection, and pap and sauce prepared on a vintage Defy stove. You can't get better than this. We settle in for dinner, pour ourselves a whiskey, and the conversation continues.
And you know, the trouble is there's only so much time in your life, and you must do it because life goes by quickly. You ask Ruth, we've been doing adventures basically all of our lives. And man, I tell you, it was like 10 minutes ago.
Yeah. Wish you did more.
When we started off camping, we had an old Isuzu Wasp diesel bakkie, which you used to have to push start down a hill for about 600 meters, literally, to get it started.
And it was a steep hill.
And it was a steep hill. And our camping equipment was a piece of canvas with a lot of holes in it that you slept on the ground outside. And our daughter, who was born, she was small, she used to sleep in a plastic washing up tub in the front seat of the bakkie.
Washing baskets?
Yeah. And that was so the hyenas couldn't eat it. And that's how we started off camping. And it's never stopped since then. We used to go to Botswana every year with Microlights doing a flyaway. We'd fly right across country. The girls would drive the cars and we would fly, and then we'd find places en route in the bush, just find a place, call them on the radio, give them directions on how to get there, and then we'd camp there, fly. We use like the one place, the cut line where they cross, so we had a cross runway. It was beautiful in the middle of absolutely nowhere near the Microlighting.
That was really nice.
We used to fly into Moremi. We watched leopards hunting from the air. We've hovered in the winds, 40-mile-an-hour winds. You just
Everybody just sits there in a row.
waving to the guys on the ground, making their little fields. Can't go anywhere. The wind is too strong. We've done hundreds of flights across. Flown to Sauces Play from Joburg.
From Joburg.
From Joburg, yeah.
In a microlight.
Yeah, that was lekker. We had a really good.
How often do you need to stop then?
We used to.
They used to
fly about 4 hours, and then we used to carry a 20-liter of fuel on the back seat, then stop and refuel, and then somewhere along the line we'd meet Ruth. She had more fuel for us.
I love doing that. Absolutely.
We flew some days.
I won't take anybody with me. I'm always by myself. Cigarettes, sweets, CDs.
Road trip.
We got chased there by a thunderstorm up in Namibia somewhere. I forget the name of the place, but we were flying along and this mega storm came up, and we just had to turn and run from it. A thunderstorm with a microlight is not survivable. So and now you're pulling bar and you're flying, but the storm is sucking the wind into it. So you're flying into a headwind. So you're flying at 80 k's an hour airspeed, but you're doing about 40 or 35 k's an hour speed over ground. And the storm is just catching you and catching you. Now we had to stop and refuel at one point, so we quickly stopped, landed on this little dirt road, refueled, quite fuel, took off, pulling bar, trying to escape. Not a ship, we couldn't escape. Eventually there was this little pannetjie underneath us. We had to land in the pan. But it was rough, old dried clay with cattle footprints, and it was a hell of a rough. So we landed there, boom, 3 of us. And we carry those long wood auger bits that you could quickly screw into the ground as a peg, tie the planes down, and the storm hit us. Bad scream. We thought it was hailing. It was the wind blowing stones off the pan surface onto the wing. That's how strong the wind was. And it howled. And eventually it suddenly went calm. And then Richard said, the eye of the storm is passing us, the wind direction is going to change. And sure as nuts, we just put the wings over, tied them down again, and the wind hit us from the other direction. And then suddenly it went calm. But now it is like 5:45 in the evening, and it's just getting scary. What do we do now? Ruth is somewhere. We don't know where she is.
She's on the main road saying, have you seen, stopping cars, have you seen 3 microlights? What's a microlight?
So eventually we decided we got 2 choices. Either we're going to sleep here in the pan with no food, no sleeping equipment, nothing, which is not the end of the world, but it's not lekker, or we're going to take off and try and find her. Because I'm calling on the radio and there's no comms, there's no cell signal, there's no nothing. So we decided, right, we're going to fly. So we pack up, and the sky is black from the clouds, still a lot of cloud around, so there's not a lot of residual light from the sun. Get in, take off, up we go. I climb up to 12,000 feet, and I'm calling on the radio, calling. Eventually I'll get her. She's now about 120 k's away. But from that altitude, you've got quite good radio signal. So I describe to her where we are, show her on the map, where she must go and turn and start heading towards us. And it gets dark. Donker. Now we're flying. So I've got a light, Richard's got a light on his plane, and the third guy's got no lights on his plane. So you said, well, you just fly it behind us, because you can see us, we can't see you, so you just stay out of the way, and then we're fine. So we're flying along, and I've got the map on my leg, and I'm looking, I can see there's a big gravel road, and in the like the starlight, because now the clouds had cleared, and I could see the road, gravel. So I fly down low, and I check, and then I see there's power line poles, with those three wires. So when there's power line poles, I kept following the road. At some point, a wire might come across the road, which is going to be a bit dodgy if you hit it. So I fly down, I'm just above the poles now, maybe 10, 20 feet above the poles, and I'm counting. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So work out the timing between the poles. So as I come to a pole where I can see there's no wire coming across, I just dive straight down, and I land on the road. Because now I know there's no cross wires, and I turn around, and I shine my light up the road, and I call Rich and tell him, right, you come and land towards me. Now use my light as an aiming point and land towards me, so you just land in a bit deeper. And he lands, and then Mark uses the 2 lights shining up and down the road, and he lands over Richard, and he lands on the road and all on the ground now. So now we start taxiing down the road. Now it's like 8 o'clock at night. We're going along, and all of a sudden we come to this river descent down into a river, and the signs are saying, wah, wah, wah. And I see on the map there's a river marked there, but it doesn't show you that there's this gorge like the Fish River Canyon. It's so steep I had to turn my engine off because it was overrunning the brake, just the thing on idle. And we go down, and we're going to start the motor and tilt the wing up to miss the rocks. It was unbelievable.
4x4 in your micro.
Yeah, and right down the bottom, in the concrete causeway, because the river had no water in it, I see lights coming. So I'm talking to the other guys on the road. I say, hey, check, here come lights, maybe that's Ruth. So I stop. We're wearing flying suits and helmets with bubble visors and all the rest, and these planes are bright Dacron colours and all the rest of it. And I tilt the wing up like this, so this car, because I can see now it's not Ruth, it's a bakkie, can stop here next to me. And the bakkie stops there next to me, and the window winds down, and I see there's 3 kleurling oaks in this bakkie. I said to him, hey, goeienaand, het jy miskien 'n wit Land Cruiser gesien? That doesn't answer me. He just looks at his mate. He says, ek gaan nooit weer fucking drink nie. And they just drove off. what he thought we were. I
Literally couldn't believe his eyes.
couldn't believe his eyes. I don't know what he thought we were, but he'd been drinking too much. Ek gaan nooit weer fucking drink. And he just drove off. And then eventually we found Ruth and we camped on the side of the road and then took off the next morning and carried on our trip.
Yeah, it was exciting.
Now we had a lot of fun.
12,000 feet in a microlight.
Oh yeah,
I would have never have guessed that even.
Oh yeah, that's easy. That's quite easy. We were in.
It's 4Ks basically.
No, it's 5,300 feet per mile.
Yes.
That's about 2.5 miles. Yeah.
2.5 miles. Yeah, it's 4Ks.
But that's above sea level. But there's still ground below you, which might be
all right.
2,000
So you might
feet
be at
above sea level.
1,000.
Yeah.
But still, I wouldn't have thought that you can go that up, that high up.
They did a very naughty at night.
We did a naughty at night. There was this guy I was flying with, Willem, and his son Augusto, who unfortunately passed away. But Augusto was really a bright young engineer guy. So we decided we're going to try for an altitude because it's quiet there. There's nobody around. There's no air traffic. We want to try and see how high we can fly. And it's 43 or 44 degrees C on the ground. To somewhere well up into the high mid-40s. I had a thermometer taped on the bar of my aeroplane so I could see what the temperature was. And now Willem, his old man, is a very lekker guy, but a very staid kind of a guy. A vat nie kans nie, you know what I mean?
Adverse.
Yeah. So we go back to the airfield at night and we put on every bit of cold weather kit we can lay our hands on. 2 balaclavas.
And I can't lie, so I'm not allowed anywhere near.
Yeah, Ruth cannot tell a fib, so she's not allowed anywhere near it. So Willem says to us, he sees us all dressed like Eskimo. Gloves on the bar, everything. Mitts, what are you doing? Says, no, we're just going to go up and fly a little bit. Because Willem will do his nut. So we take off and we start climbing. We climb. Eventually, Augusto was quite a bit lighter than me. He was about 15 kilos or 18 kilos lighter than me. He got up to 18,200 feet. I got up to 17,800 feet. And the plane just wouldn't climb anymore. It just ran out on the air fuel mix, it just wouldn't climb anymore. And what we decided was as soon as we ran out of steam, because it's not a lot of physical effort, so you're not going to suffer hypoxia net sommer. It's only when you start to do physical stuff that you're suddenly going to have an oxygen shortage. But lack of oxygen gives you lack of judgment as if you were alcoholically inebriated. So you had to be quite careful. So we decided as soon as we get to a point where we won't climb, if either one of us says go down, we go down. So we get up. Augusto was at 18.2. He was just above me. I was at 17.8. And my plane wouldn't climb anymore. I said to him, game over. From where we were, we could see Francistown clearly, which was 180 k's away. It was quite amazing.
I was talking to them on the radio, couldn't even see them.
It was crystal clear air, minus 14 degrees C. Where we were, minus 14 degrees C. It was bitter cold, but there was no moisture in the atmosphere, so there was no ice or anything, because sometimes you get ice forming on your hands, even at low altitudes. And then we cut the motors, hit the mags, cut off, and then we glided back. It took us 34 minutes to glide back down to Nata Airfield in ever-decreasing spirals. And eventually we came back down and we landed. But it was a most amazing flight.
Yeah, it was nice.
Yeah, strictly against the books, but
Somebody's got it.
Did you ever fly bush planes? Like smaller kit planes or?
No. I've only ever flown weight shift. But we've had a huge amount of fun.
Yeah,
we were flying.
So nice.
We were flying in the Microlighting Game Reserve one day. Ruth was in the back seat. And we were doing like a jolly. We were flying from Naipan. We were based at Naipan. We were using the pans as a runway. And we decided to fly down into the Microlighting Game Reserve. So Ruth says to me, I need to go to the loo. So I said, okay, we'll find a place to land just now. She says, I need to go to the loo now.
Yeah, and he looks back and I'm looking at him like I'm really near the loo.
So I said, we'll find a place to land just now. She says, now. I'm wearing your flying suit. I'm sitting on your seat in your airplane. I'm going to wet myself now. So we landed. As I landed, everybody else landed. All their wives had the same problem. They all needed to pee. I don't know why women need to pee like that, but they all needed to pee.
One for all.
So they're in the middle of the Machadi Game Reserve. Everybody got out, had a pee, got back in the planes, took off and flew again.
Amazing. Uncle Joe, thanks for this evening, and Ruth, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it. And we always enjoyed
You're
it.
going to be riding bikes around the place.
Well,
that'll-
I hope something comes out of it that you can use. If we do it again ever, then I'll think about it more carefully and I'll tell you specific stuff that I can give you more usable content.
I think you can book that one. We'll definitely be back.
Well, thank
For
you.
episode 2, I think we've got quite a few guys lined up already. I think the people are going to ask for another episode with Uncle Joe
Yes.
and all his stories, because we didn't even get to the end of the previous break,
Yeah.
and we've had so much chats out at the fire as well. There was quite a few very nice stories.
You're going to have pudding with Joe, hey?
We are going to have pudding. We're going to have a whiskey now as well.
Oh, good.
No, we're going to continue this, I think.
Okay.
Just the
I just
video
cut the video now, and then we'll definitely continue this on. But thank you so much. We really appreciate it, and we'll be back.
Lekker.
Definitely. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.